Good morning, and welcome to Fountain Street Church. We are a beloved community that welcomes newcomers of all interests, sexual orientations, identifications, religious beliefs, and anything else you might imagine, knowing that we are enriched by your presence. While we are engaging in transition, we understand that we are all in transition. Shall I start over? Okay. Or some state of change all the time. And we embrace the change and you as you become a part of us. Again, welcome to Fountain Street Church. I want to thank Eric Littler for joining us this morning to read our ancient and contemporary witness pieces of the program. His name, I didn't get his name in time. I was going to say his name didn't get in, but it's my fault. Our invitation to community this morning. Bring your questions here. Bring your doubts and toss them around. Give them some air. And never forget to bring your love, knowing, of course, that sharing multiplies it. More for you, more for me. Bring all of yourself here, even the parts you don't yet know. We can handle it. We can acknowledge all of you. Every little ebullient and frightening piece of you. Come here as whole as you can be and find more wholeness in the holiness of the whole of us. This is the time where you are invited to greet the people around you and share the love, and you will be called back with our opening hymn. Hymn.
Hello. Ancient Witness, poem by Hafiz. I have come into this world to see this, the sword drop from men's hands, even at the height of their arc of anger, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh to wound. I have come into this world to see this, all creatures hold hands as we pass through this miraculous existence we share on the way to even a greater being of soul. I have come into this world to hear this. Every song the earth has sung since it was conceived in the divine's womb and began spinning from its wish. Every song by wing and fin and hoof. Every song by hill and field and tree and woman and child. Every song of stream and rock. Every song of tool and lyre and flute. Every song of gold and emerald and fire. Every song the heart should cry with magnificent dignity to know itself as God. I have come into this world to experience this, people so true to love they would rather die before speaking an unkind word. People so true their lives are God's covenant, the promise of hope. I have come into the world to see this, the sword drop from our hands, even at the height of their arc of rage, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh we can wound. From Mark Nepo's book, More Together Than Alone, these words from his chapter, Notions of Community. In the summer of 2004, I was in Barcelona attending the Parliament of the World's Religions. One morning, I was sitting with the crowd listening to Dr. Ervin Laszlo, a scientist and philosopher, who was speaking through translators about the Akasha field. Dr. Laszlo described experiments in which different atoms were also placed in close proximity. Once atoms A and B would vibrate in harmony, atom A was placed near a third atom, P. Amazingly, the vibration of A and B was imparted to atom P. The reverse appeared to be true as well. Atom A was left with atom P until they vibrated in harmony. Then atom A was again placed closely to atom B. The vibration and harmony of atoms A and P were then imparted to atom B. When people meditate together, their brainwaves quickly harmonize. And when a newcomer joins the group, the newcomer's brainwaves harmonize with those of the group. This suggests that intimacy is a catalyst for the experience of oneness. All of this implies that there is a unified field of presence, very near to each of us, that ranges from atoms to cells to souls. The crucial question then is, how do we relate to this field of presence? How do we tap into its energy and resources? As Dr. Laszlo spoke, his words were being translated into 4 languages at once. I realized that what he was suggesting was happening there in Barcelona. I was part of a short-term community of 8,000 people from all over the world who had come together because of a common belief in something larger than ourselves. Something was shimmering there between us, like the vibration and harmony generated by those atoms put in close proximity with each other. Hasn't this always been the power of communities, to somehow break through the trance of their times? Isn't this descriptive of the throngs surrounding Buddha under the Bodhi tree? Or the hundreds gathered to hear Jesus give the Sermon on the Mount? Or the thousands following Gandhi's March of Salt to the Indian Ocean? Or the million crowding the mall in Washington to hear Martin Luther King Jr. give his landmark speech? Isn't this the mystery of self-organizing moments of collective presence? These instances confirm there is a subtle, if mysterious, oneness that cradles us all. We can access the collective presence and memory among human beings and enliven it. Actually, it doesn't take much. Once we are opened to feel the pull of things coming together, whether it be atoms vibrating, strangers meditating, or hundreds gathering around an elder's presence. As we watch a river from its bank, the current seems impossibly fast, but from the center of the current, the flow of life surrounds us and carries us. Watching from our isolation, the prospect of community seems impossible until we dare to step down and enter. Once in the current of human connection, we are carried along. Every story of community, large and small, bears witness to how strangers and loved ones alike discover the common human beat and the kinship of presence.
My family started attending Fountain Street Church in 1965. I was in the 5th grade. Coming from the Methodist church where my father had been a minister and where the dogma was fairly narrow and specific, I felt as though I had come home. I had arrived at a place where questions were encouraged, where answers were occasionally agreed upon, and where people celebrated rational thought and scientific method. Fountain Street Church in 1965 was a magical place. Our congregation came together with a sense of moral and intellectual superiority. Many members were college educated, worked in the professions, or owned and managed their own prestigious and lucrative businesses, and gave generously to this beacon of liberal thought in West Michigan. People came here from many religions, discouraged from being told what to do and how to do it, based on sacred texts that reflected the mythology of history. As a child, I was told and believed that we were unique. There was obviously no other church like ours in West Michigan, and the rhetoric taught me that nowhere else was there any place like Fountain Street Church. Not only were we the only liberal church in West Michigan, we were possibly the only church with such sensible attitudes anywhere. And that was our core value. That was what held us together. We were different, and we were right. What children believe, though, becomes jaded by reality as the years go by. When I was 18, because I was 18, I was invited to an adult party after one of Duncan Littlefair's debates with Lester DeCoster that took place at Highland High School, my alma mater. As I sat on the floor listening to others discuss A Course in Miracles, I realized, with some shock and disappointment, that I disagreed with what Duncan was saying. It took me a while to process this. After all, Duncan was the smartest, savviest, coolest guy around, wasn't he? Everybody knew it. Sometime later, I visited my boyfriend from Hope College in Chicago. I followed up on some of my doubts about what I had been told about Fountain Street's corner on the Rational Church Market. I took out the Chicago phone book. You remember those, right? And I looked under Unitarian. There I found 14 Unitarian churches in the greater Chicago area. Although our history was different, perhaps we were not philosophically so unique, nor so alone, after all. And perhaps, like many other white-dominated churches of the time, we were not unique in our membership and funding structure, or in the top-down white male leadership model under which we functioned. We had many guilds, organizations formed to provide services for church members, and occasionally outside the church walls. We had a budget large enough to support 3 full-time ministers, at least 4 full-time office staff, a full-time music director / organist / choir director, and 2 other part-time people who worked under him, audio staff, and a team of building service personnel. And primary to all of this was the strong male at the top. Youth programming was huge. I can remember gatherings of teens sponsored by Fountain Club with well over 100 youth. The character school classes were full, including the 3rd and 4th floors. Some of you may never have seen the 3rd and 4th floors. I understood from this that I was not alone in my liberal perspective, as I had felt in the Methodist Church and in my hometown of Holland, Michigan. What a relief. We followed a very traditional worship format and the highlights of the Christian liturgical year, although many would not have called themselves Christians. The liturgy was familiar, as were the celebrations, and we gleaned from them that which worked for us individually and as a community. At the same time all this magic was happening, though, we were known as a standoffish place, a place where newcomers had a difficult time finding a place for themselves. Perhaps some of that came from our sense of uniqueness. It's hard to welcome others when you're not really sure they qualify to be part of the club. And then Duncan retired, and things began to shift. This was, of course, a great many years ago now, and I think it's safe to say that the times we remember from before Duncan's retirement have become enshrined. Just as one of the presidential candidates continually shouts, "Make America Great Again," some people here at Fountain Street continue to insist that we must make Fountain Street Church great again. And they believe that the way to do that is to reenact the structure and the thinking from 50 years ago, which will, of course, also bring in the kind of budget we had then. The belief that the model that worked 50 years ago will work again today fails to take a couple of things into account. One is that we are no longer the congregation of 50 years ago. Few of our members have deep pockets, and the people in the larger community who do tend to be more religiously conservative. Single-parent families and families with both parents working find it more difficult to get their kids to church on Sunday, much less to activities that we might consider scheduling during the week. And the world we live in is not the world of 50 years ago. When I was a child and a teenager here, there were no sports events or school activities on Sunday at all. Moms had the freedom to transport us to church for midweek meetings and choir rehearsals. Church activities, even at this liberal church, were sacrosanct. The young and new attendees among us, unaware of the history and the way it felt to be part of it, can barely see that things have changed, at least any more than they continually change day to day and moment to moment. People who have come to Fountain Street Church in the last 10 years or so are probably more familiar with chaos than traditional structure. And perhaps that's helpful, because chaos, at least, is predictable. One thing we had in 1965 that we do not have yet, at least, is a core sense of who we are as a community. Then we were, or at least thought we were, unique, superior, and we defined ourselves largely by what we were not. We were not a church of narrow dogma. We were not a community that required certain acts or behaviors to achieve eternal rest. We were not all those other churches people had left discouraged. And even since then, ever since then, we've been trying to figure out who we are. Perhaps the most disturbing thing that any leader of this community must deal with is the sense of entitlement that seems to have come from the early days. When we had lots of full-time staff and more money, a congregant could simply say, "I would like this to happen." And someone would most likely make it happen. These days, people still say things like that to members of the staff, and those staff members are rarely able to fulfill the congregant's desires. Maybe it's not just here. When I think of the way people talk about civil projects and government, I hear the same things. They will take care of it. Or, why doesn't the government do something? In our church, as in our state and our country, we must recognize that they is we. I remember not long after I was hired as chaplain speaking with some women in the social hall who said, "We need a women's spiritual group to happen." And I thought, oh, I've been wanting to do that. And then I thought about what I was being paid to do and how much time I had, and I said to them, "Go for it." And they did. They took responsibility for what they wanted and made it happen. When Brent Smith came, so did many new members. I didn't especially like him. I had the thought that while I had been at Fountain Street since 5th grade, it might be changing in ways that made it no longer my church. The congregation was growing under Brent, which told me that it would continue to exist. That was important to me. Yet I no longer felt it was my church. You may be feeling that way right now. What has happened to my church? What has happened to the way I felt when I first started coming here? How can I get it back? It has changed, and it continues to change. The idea of beloved community has grown stronger and stronger under Reverend Christopher's leadership, and it gives me hope. But the continued resistance to really useful, constructive change feels frustrating, and the longer it takes to implement changes that can help the community, the less likely it will actually help. I have noticed in my personal life that trying to make things go a certain way is most often detrimental to my well-being. The same applies here. Resistance is futile, as the Borg say. Here come the questions. These are questions every person who pledges or attends regularly, or even who considers themselves peripherally a member of Fountain Street Church, needs to consider. What is it you want from a church, from this church? In what way can the staff help create the environment you want? What can you do to make it happen? What kind of community support do you need personally? How does your family benefit from such a community? When you want something from an organization, any organization, how do you approach getting your needs met? Do you demand that the people on staff do what you want them to do? Do you offer money or threaten to withhold it? Or do you approach them to find out how you can make it happen with their help? Or how they can make it happen with your help? Do you elicit interest in a new project and look for other congregants to help put it together? Or do you assume that your idea is the best one and demand that others make it happen? Do you go to a man or men for their approval? And when do you come to the realization that things may have changed to the point where this institution no longer has what you want or need, and it's time to let go? These questions are all part of a more basic one. What brings us and holds us together? Since we are no longer the liberal church in West Michigan, and since we can no longer define ourselves by what we are not, who and what are we? I have to say that as someone who has been part of this church community for 59 years, the way this community has grown in the past couple of years since COVID has been extremely encouraging to me. I am proud of us for welcoming new people, for being flexible enough to try to do things differently, for varying our worship without a huge hue and cry. And at the same time, I have wondered how we will continue this growth and connection. Around what principles do we gather and commit? Yet more questions for you to consider. What attracts you to this community? What emotional need does it fill for you that you can't get anywhere else? What social need? What makes you want to get up and come here on Sunday morning or at any other time during the week? Is it the staff? Is it programming? Is it messages from the pulpit? Is it the friends you have made here? And how do you benefit from these people in your life? The end of the morning talk should wrap up with some answers, or at least suggestions. If I were to answer these questions myself, I would say our core value, our unifying commitment, is to love. We represent and continue to learn about love. It sounds almost trite, yet is this not the essence of our being here together? There are so many, many people here that I love. People I know well, and people I barely know. I love how hard we are all working to be the best people we can be for ourselves, for one another, and for the larger world. I love the programs hosted by staff and by volunteers that encourage us to learn about ourselves and how we can bring our best to this life. I love the parts of this community that embrace our opportunity to move and grow together, not a single body, but a murmuration of starlings or a school of fish, thinking and behaving as individuals who have the long-term interests of the community at heart in all that they do, the choices they make, and the words they speak to one another. In deep and abiding love, let us take a moment to be quiet together. As we feel each other here in this space and our other fellow Fountain Streeters in other places, as we sit quietly thinking about the questions that face our church community, may we remember the words of Hafiz. I have come into this world to see this. The sword, literal or figurative, drop from men's hands, even at the height of their arc of anger, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh to wound. May we choose not to wound one another, and in doing so, choose not to wound ourselves. Blessed be. is the time where we put our money where our mouths are. We commit to this church community and to the larger community with the money we put in the plate on Sunday mornings. Half of it stays here to help keep the lights on, and the other half goes into the community to support organizations who do things we believe in. The morning offering will now be received. May it be compounded for you and for all. Few announcements for you this morning. At 12:30 in room 109, you can view the film Crip Camp, about a camp for disabled youth that grew up right down the road from Woodstock in the late 70s. The director of Camp Sunshine in Holland and our own Katie Bush will lead a talk back after the movie. After the service at about 12:15, after people get their coffee and wander in, people are invited to gather in the chapel to discuss ideas that were presented in today's talk, as well as other thoughts about who we are and where we're going. It will be hosted by me, and Tim Chester will join me. In case you weren't taking copious notes while I was speaking and you're interested in the questions I asked, there are sheets on the table in the narthex with all my questions for your consideration. I'll be out there, so if we run out of copies, you can let me know, and I'll get some more. As we depart this physical space today, with all of our personalities, all of our egos, all of our fears and joys and concerns, may we take love with us, the love we give and the love we are given, and may we bring it back when we return.